Hi people, I want to talk about some Shadow of the Erdtree lore today. Specifically the subject of the Hornsent heavens and the origin of the Crucible. So to start, let's talk about the Hornsent themselves. Anyone who has played the game knows that they are a very spiritual race. We have these ascetics, we have inquisitors, tutelary deities, and we know that they worship the Crucible itself. And here comes the subject of the heavens, which we hear mentioned by the Hornsent Grandam. So the first dialogue we hear is when we put on the divine beast mask after we defeat the boss, and she will have this whole tirade, thanking the beast for having been revived, believing that we are the beast and she can feel its scent. Implication is that she can't see us because either of her old age or, because she kind of does have horns sticking out of her eye socket. And then she says this. After an eternity of the mind, our voices have at last reached the heavens. So basically she attributes this revival of the divine beast to the heavens. And then there's this other dialogue. After we defeat Mesmer, she will have these two lines. The first one, Heavens, great and gallant sculpted keeper. And then later on, she will say, Heaven hath borne witness to our plight, thy gleaming wrath, and the unparalleled dance. So you might think to yourself, okay, but, maybe she just meant it's kind of like a typical phrase, some abstract phrase invoking some kind of higher power, but it doesn't have to mean anything very specific in the context of the game. But I believe it is not so, and some of the clues we can find for this are in the descriptions of the relating to the Divine Beast. So in the Divine Beast Dancing Lion mask itself, we find, this description. Ritual headwear in the form of a divine beast's head, used to perform the lion dance, worn by the very finest of the sculpted keepers. Alas, it no longer responds to the old woman's earnest prayer. Divine invocation heightens the intensity of the storm alongside strength and dexterity, but reduces the restorative effect of drinking from a flask of sacred tears. So we don't really hear anything about the heavens here, but then let's see the other description. This is the talisman that we can get from the beast's remembrance. A charm depicting the crazed cavorting dance of the divine beast, conducted at the Tower Festival, raises potency of storms. Divine beasts are messengers of the heavens, and their rage mirrors the tumult of the skies, of which storms are the pinnacle. So here we see that the divine beast is literally called the messenger of the heavens. But does that give us any clear indication about what these heavens were? Well, we do see that there is a common thread in these descriptions, and that is the mention of storms, right? This item heightens the intensity of storm. This item raises the potency of the storms. And the rage mirrors the tumult of the skies, of which storms are the pinnacle. So this is kind of interesting, because in the game there is actually a mention of storms in another concept, in fact in the base game itself, and that would be in Lord Placidius Axe himself, the first Elden Lord and the Elden Lord of Farum Azula. So in his description we can read, Remember of Dragon Lord Placidius Axe hewn into the Erdtree. A Dragon Lord whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erdtree. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. Yeah, so we see that Placidius Axe is mentioned as someone who lies at the heart of the storm. And in fact, if we look at Farum Azula from afar, we do see a huge storm raging inside of it. And that's the one that is covering Placidius Axe. And kind of when you think about it, it does make sense, right? Like, what is Farum Azula? It's literally a city set high in the sky. It has these immortal dragons. It had the Elden lore of its time, and the Elden Lord would have a consort who would be the god of that time, right? The same one as America in the modern age. So it would be kind of like a heaven to the people living on land. But if you're not convinced, let's go a bit further. So for now we talk about the other subject of this video, and that would be the Crucible itself. So we know that the Crucible is basically related to the origins of life in the lands between. It's called the primordial form of the Erdtree, and it's called the place where all life once blended together. We know it causes beasts to grow horns and tails and wings. We have all the aspects of the Crucible which are related to these different things. And we know that the Hornsent, since they attributed it, especially horns, to be something divine, even to the point where they would persecute people without them. But, well, what does this have to do with the heavens? Well, we have to go and explore another subject that the DLC brought us, something that we didn't really see in the base game. And that is an incantation that we find in Enir-Ilim, in the last Legacy dungeon, in the holy city of the Hornsent. That's an incantation called Spira. And what do we read here? Superior sorcery of the Tower Priest, wielded as an incantation of the Spiral. Wrap one's arms together and hold them up to the heavens, summon a spiral of light that erupts at the enemy's feet. Column of light persists for as long as the button is pressed. The spiral is a normalized crucible current that one day will form a column that stretches to the gods. And we see that as mentioned, spirals are mentioned in the description, and we see that the crucible current here is actually a spiral. And this is kind of interesting, right? The crucible current is in the form of a spiral. And when you think about it, well, it does kind of make sense why the crucible would be represented by a spiral. Because, going back to what the crucible is, right? It's the source of all life, and it causes all these different things to grow on beasts. And this does kind of remind us and tie to the real life concepts of evolution and genetic mutations. And of course, genes are composed of DNA, and DNA are in the shape of a spiral. So I think the analogies are pretty clear here. And fun fact, we all know that, well, we all predict that Dark Souls and Elden Ring took some pretty heavy inspiration from Berserk, but another anime that I believe that here might have been influential is Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, because it's actually an anime that focuses on what's called spiral energy, and one of the main hero often talks about creating a drill straight to the heavens, so this connection between the crucible current going to the heavens and the drill going to the heavens is kind of funny to me. But, well, going back on track. The spiral imagery. So, when I read that description, it kind of struck me because, well, I realized that basically we have spiral everywhere in Enir-Ilim, right? We have columns composed of spirals. We see like spiral imageries on murals and reliefs, but also the whole structure itself is like a spiral. So it seems that this crucible current was something that they tried to create through the whole structure of the city. And the connection between the crucible and the image of the spiral has been kind of staring us in the face from even the base game, because the Crucible Knights themselves have a spiral on their cloth, right? So this isn't just a new addition to the DLC. This does connect to things we all have already seen in the base game. But, well, to further connect it back to the heavens, we need to talk about another important aspect of the games, and that would be the Elden Ring itself, the titular concept of the whole game. So here we have the Elden Ring as it is shown in the title screen. And, well, we know that this was an important subject of worships, obviously, in the times of America. And we see its depictions all over the game on armors, like on of Lendl soldiers and certain talisman relating to the Golden Order. Because, well, it was here in its form before the shattering, it was the most kind of foundational concept, right? America herself was supposed to be the vessel of the Elden Ring, which we even see in the ending of the game. We literally see it embedded inside her. And why am I talking about the Elden Ring? Well, because the Elden Ring actually is visible in another place, not strictly related to Lendl. Why? In Farum Azula itself, specifically in the boss room where we fight Malekith. We see a depiction of the Elden Ring. But the interesting thing is, it's kind of different, right, from the modern Elden Ring. It has this kind of flowing imagery in the background. It has, the modern Elden Ring has this rune arc. Instead of the flowing imagery, it has this cross hatch, which kind of looks like the rune of Radagon we see in his core seals. But there is another important difference here relating to the subject at hand. And that's this, what do we see in the middle of the Elden Ring? Why? We do see an actual, here let me try to draw this. We do see an actual spiral. So the image of the spiral is literally inside of the old version of the Elden Ring. And what do we think this means? Well, if the Elden Ring is the central concept of the world, if it's the artifact that either governed or at least had a huge influence over certain aspects of reality. I mean, we know when the Rune of Death was plucked out by Marika, it had a whole influence on how even death worked in the lands between. So here we see that the Crucible was part, or this spiral symbol, which I believe relates to the Crucible, was part of the Elden Ring. And I think we can take this concept even a bit further. Because let's look at what in my opinion is one of the most important item descriptions in the game. The item description for the Elden Stars. The legendary incantation is the most ancient of those that derive from the Erdtree. It is said that long ago the Greater Will sent the Golden Star bearing a beast into the land between, which would later become the Elden Ring. Right? This is foundation, in a sense, the foundation of the whole lands between. This is the Elden Beast that we fight in the end of the game. And this is the one that would later become the Elden Ring. And what do we see on the image of the Elden Star? Well, we see again a spiral. So what does this mean? Well, in my opinion, it means that the Elden Beast is strictly tied to the Crucible. In fact, I think that he might just be the origin of the Crucible itself. Either he created it or managed to flow its energy and spark the existence of life itself in the lands between. And I think this is actually supported by dialogue, by one of I think the most interesting NPCs in the game, Count Emir. Because what does he say? I too am a glintstone sorcerer. We study the stars and examine the life therein. Are you familiar with our findings? Long ago we began as stardust, born of a great rupture far across the skies. We too are children of the Greater Will. Is that not divine? Is that not sublime? And yet none can fathom its implications, its utter brilliance. So let's think about it like this. If the Elden Beast is sent by the Greater Will, and if it set up the creation of the Crucible, which is the source of all life, so these words would be actually pretty, not just metaphorical, they would be literal, right? They would mean that all the life in lands between does come from the Greater Will. And so, in summary, how do I think all of this ties together? Well, basically I believe that the Hornsent, in their studies of the Crucible, or perhaps in some knowledge that they had passed down to them, they discovered that the source of the Crucible is in the Elden Ring itself. And in the times of before America, the Elden Ring was in Farum Azula. That's why the Crucible current, they reached to the heavens, right? To Farum Azula, to the land that they would consider the heavens and the lands of the gods. And there are, of course, some questions we can have about this, like what do they really know about Farum Azula? Did they know specifically it was a place where dragons lived? After all, the interesting thing is when we look at dragons, they kind of do embody a lot of the aspects of the Crucible, right? They have horns, they have wings, they have tails. In a sense, they're like a manifestation of the Crucible in all of its aspects. And it is possible that they could have a glimpse of this. Perhaps they had just had direct knowledge. It's even possible that there were prophets sent from Farum Azula who were supposed to spread the knowledge of the Elden Ring and of the Crucible. And perhaps, thanks to that, or either by themselves or by knowledge passed down to them, they were able to direct this current straight to it. And there are some other subjects that we can tie to this, though they're kind of tangential, but the interesting thing is that the spiral imagery is something that we also see in the Godslayer's Greatsword, right? The sword that belonged to the Glowmite Queen. So did she have some kind of connection to the Crucible? Some people theorize that the Glowmite Queen was actually the god of Placidius Axe. I recommend watching a video by Cosmos. He made a very interesting video on this subject, trying to prove this thesis. But if not, well, I do think she at least had some significant ties to the Crucible. And another interesting thing is in Enir-Ilim, we hear that the Divine Bear warriors were the very first of all horned warriors. And we also hear that their technique was said to bear resemblance to the Golden Crucible. This is kind of interesting, right? The Crucible is literally called golden, tying us back to the golden image of the Elden Ring in Farum Azula. But regarding the birds, well, we know that the Farum Azula was occupied by dragons, but it was occupied also by many other bestial races. Among them, we do see hawks. But also the interesting thing is that we do know that they probably worship the twin bird. In fact, this image of the twin bird is taken straight from the entrance to the boss arena where we fight Malekith, right? This is a place which seemed very important since it bore the image of the Elden Ring. So there is some suggestion that the twin bird was a very important character in their mythology. I don't want to dive too deep into it because this might take us on a whole other tangent. But another type of beast that we see in Farum Azula, since most of the beasts we see are undead at the time, so some of them it's hard to deduce what type of beasts they had. But some of them bear resemblance to lions, which can tie us back to the divine beast Dancing Lion. And of course we know that there was a lord of beasts, Sirash, who was a lion. So it might be that the Hornsent will worship not only the dragons, but just different types of these bestial races that were in Farum Azula. That's pretty much all I have. This image pretty much sums up how I feel at the moment trying to connect these dots. So tell me if you think, if I'm onto something or if I should just take off my tinfoil hat. And thank you for watching. This is actually my first YouTube video, so tell me how it went. Tell me what you think of the theories, if you have maybe some of your own theories relating to this or some counter arguments. I'll be glad to hear them in the comments.